Well, good afternoon, everyone. And can I say that my colleagues and I are very pleased to be in Belfast. We're very pleased to see people in the public gallery, which has been unusual so far, not just because of COVID, but for other reasons, no doubt. We always felt it important that we should come to all parts of the affected people's places of work and where they live. And so we've been to London, we've been to Cardiff, we've been to Leeds, we've been to Glasgow, and now we're in Belfast. These sessions, today and tomorrow, will bring to a close what we've called the human impact sessions, i.e. those accounts from various people about the effect all this has had upon their lives. So it's been very important for us to hear that evidence. That being so, I am extremely grateful to all of those people who have made witness statements and to those who have made witness statements who've also made themselves available to give oral evidence. We are extremely grateful to you all. With those words of introduction, I shall hand over to Ms. Kennedy. You may have discerned that I am Welsh. You may discern that Ms. Kennedy is from these parts, but I leave that to her when she speaks. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. Our first witness today is Mrs. Connolly.
Repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly, declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Could you confirm your name, please?
Deirdre Connolly.
And in front of you, you should have a witness statement. Do you have one there?
Yes.
Did you make this statement for the inquiry?
I did, yes.
And it should run to 12 pages.
Yes.
And is that your signature at the end there on the last page?
Yes.
Have you read through this statement recently?
I have, yes.
And is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
I'm going to start, if I may, by asking a few questions about you. Where in Northern Ireland do you live?
I live in Strabane and West Tyrone.
Who do you live with?
My husband and 2 children.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Killeator, outside Castlereagh, where I had the post office.
Can you tell us a bit about that place?
Killeator?
Yes.
It's rural, it's on the Donegal border. And it was from where I lived, the shop was about 3 or 4 miles just. And I would have went there with my granny to lift her pensions on a Thursday when I was younger. So when the opportunity arose to take over the shop and post office, I jumped for it.
What did you do before you worked for the post office?
I worked doing credit control within a cooking oil company. And they moved premises, and the company has built itself up to be a big company. He didn't want me to leave, but we thought it was a good opportunity for us as a family to try and better ourselves.
And you took over that branch in March 2006, is that about right?
1st of February 2006.
1st of February 2006. Yeah. And how did you feel at that time about taking over the post office?
Excited. It's a big company. We thought this will be us. This will be our retirement fund.
How much did you pay for your post office?
We paid for the shop. There was a shop, a house, and 3 stores. So the shop and house was 225,000, and the stores were 75. But this, we only leased it for the first 2 years to see if we could get it built up because it was had been run down. We said we'll give it 2 years to see if we can build it up. So we done that, and then we agreed a price before we actually signed anything. So that was the price then 2 years later.
When you took over, what training did you receive?
None.
How did you feel using Horizon?
I relied on the previous sub-postmaster to come in and show me how to do basic transactions. chip and pin to give the pensioners their money out, postage stamps. That was basically the only training I got. Post office did say that they took me to Belfast for training for a week, but that didn't happen.
Did you use the helpline at all?
The helpline was... I phoned numerous times, but I was getting nowhere, and they actually didn't understand my accent.
I've had that problem too.
You were later approached to take over some other outreach sites.
Yes, in 2009.
Could you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, in 2009 I was approached to take on the 2 other outreach sites. The previous person who was doing them, they had got a warning from the police that there was tiger kidnappings at that stage in Northern Ireland. That means that families were being held hostage and somebody would be take money out of the safe. So he gave it up. So I offered to do it for some reason.
How did you feel about taking on those places?
Challenge, yeah. Yeah, I didn't mind because the people I actually knew the areas and they were very remote. And it says, well, there's old people there who need their pensions as well as everybody else.
What support did the post office offer you in running those 2 rural places?
They gave me a computer and a case to bring me money and a panic alarm button. But the panic alarm button needs signal, and on the 2 sites they're rural, so there was no network. On one occasion I did have to call the police because I thought I was being followed, and I phoned up the helpline and explained this to them, and it says, well, press your panic alarm. That was the response I got from them. It's very rural. The whole area was very rural, and I was nervous. After that, I was very nervous taking the money anywhere.
Someone came to visit you on the 2nd of June 2010, is that right?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us how you first came across this person?
Yeah, I went up as normal to open the shop, but it's 20. And there was this car, because Gleader's in a really rural village, everybody knew everybody else's car. So I recognised this as a strange car, so I didn't get out of my car until somebody local came, and then this man got out of the car, and he introduced himself as Terry Smithson from Post Office, and he was there to do an audit. And I said, that's fine. So I opened up the door and I went in. And I went down, and because it's a time lock safe, I went down and I set the time lock. I think it was 15 minutes from memory. I can't really remember, but and he went and put up a sign, audit in progress, and I just left him to it up there. And so it was in the back of the shop. So it was just a wee box in the back of the shop. The post office was. So I continued to open the shop, got papers out and all the rest, and about 9 o'clock I had somebody coming in to do the shop to let me. Normally I would do the rollover or the balancing on Wednesday. So she came in and I went into the office was looking at paperwork and stuff, and about 9, shortly after 9 I got a knock on the door from Mr. Smithson, and he says there's a discrepancy, and I looked at him and I says, how much? And he says, a big one. And I says, can't be. I says, let me go up and check. He says, no. He says, I have to suspend you. And he took the keys and he done whatever he needed to be done. I was totally shocked. Didn't know. I phoned my husband. He was down at home. So he came straight up. He was up within 15, 20 minutes. And we just didn't understand what was happening. Sorry.
You take as much time as you like, all right?
So Darius come up and we talked about it, and we went out for a drive just to clear our heads, because we just couldn't understand how discrepancy. he did tell me it was about £17,000 discrepancy. I says, can't be, it really can't be. I says, let me go on and check, and I couldn't go on and check. And so then I couldn't cope. I had to go home, and let Darius stayed in the shop with him, and he was there till about 4 o'clock in the shop that day. And he was, whatever he done, and changed codes or whatever, and he left about 4 o'clock. So then he said to be back the following week to do a rollover again. Well, needless to say, I wasn't able to come out of the house after that, but my husband, Darius, he was in the shop the following week, and all of a sudden, it was only in about 15-20 minutes, and Darius has said that he came up from the post office with a wad of notes and says, there's £1,000 I found in the safe that I didn't see last week. So that reduced my discrepancy to 15,592. Didn't put much faith in auditors at that stage.
How did you feel at that time?
Regarding that,
Yeah.
disgusted. I thought, well, if he found £1,000 there this week, what else did he miss last week? I couldn't understand, like, how can you find, it's not a big safe, it's only a small safe, so the cash was there, and I wasn't in the office that day at all, because he's been in there doing the audit. So how could he miss it?
And did he show you anything that evidenced the alleged shortfall?
He gave me paperwork at some stage, but that was my head wasn't looking at it.
I think shortly afterwards you received a letter then. Do you want to tell us about that?
Right, the first letter was from to go to a meeting in Royal Mail headquarters here in Belfast, who the NFSP representative come with me, and he was from County Down. I can't remember his name. He came with me and my husband, and well, Darius wasn't allowed anywhere near it. I had tablets on me. I had to be sedated. I wasn't able to cope. But I went to this meeting, and all I remember is that he told me to plead guilty and pay the money back. And I said no. And the second meeting then, there was a further meeting with the fraud investigator, Suzanne Winters. And that morning, myself, Darius, and the family solicitor went up. And we walked up the stairs, and before we got near the room, Suzanne Winters frog marched my husband out to the street, said that he wasn't allowed to be in with me. Let the family solicitor come in and said to him, this is a tape recording, but you're not allowed to say anything. And there was another man then there, and apparently she said to me, this man has been flown in from London this morning to interview you. That wasn't a nice experience. In the middle of the whole thing, they said to me, did you take the money for the paramilitaries? Now, in Northern Ireland, if you mention paramilitaries, that's dangerous territory you're treading in. And all I could think on, is this going to get out? Is it going to say that I've been taking money? I felt then safe for the safety of my family.
What were you worried about in relation to the paramilitaries? Could you just elaborate?
To be taking money for paramilitaries in Northern Ireland, it's very, very dangerous. Anything to do with paramilitaries in Northern Ireland is dangerous, and if that got out into the country or Killeader or whatever, anything could happen to you. Mm-hmm. Or your family.
And these two interviews that you had... Interrogation, as I call it. Right, fine. Were there any formalities at the beginning, like, for example, issuing you with a caution?
They said that they were interviewing me under caution.
Right.
And the Deduct tapes,
And were both the sessions tape recorded or just the second one?
Just the second one.
Just the second one.
yeah.
And when they said it was an interview under caution, did they actually use the words of a caution, which begins something along the lines of, you don't have to say anything,
No.
but anything you do say,
No,
nothing like that?
no, it just said that
They
you're
just used the expression interview
under caution.
All right.
And I haven't got a copy of the recording. When I was going through the litigation, it was nowhere to be found.
Did they ever send you one and you just couldn't find it, or
No.
didn't you receive
No,
one?
I never got one.
Right, fine.
What happened after that interview?
Right. We come back out into the car, and my family sisters said to my husband, he says, get the money gathered. That woman won't be able to cope. It was getting difficult.
So what did you and your husband do?
Darius contacted his mother, and I contacted my mother and my uncle, and we got the money gathered up. And we sent a cheque to Brian Trotter. I sent a letter with the cheque, asking him to investigate where the discrepancy was, and if there was a mistake made, if I had made a mistake, to let me know. I'm still waiting on an answer. It was never replied to.
Did you pay back? I think you said it was a 15,000.
15,592.
I'm now going to ask you some questions about the impact that all of this has had on you. You've mentioned some of the money that you lost. Are there any other financial losses you've suffered as a result of this?
Well, we had to remortgage the house. We went bankrupt. The debts, because people stopped coming into the shop, the debts built up, and we were declared bankrupt in 2013. So that was another frown upon us. And then, in May 2013, I took epilepsy with the stress of it. At 43 years of age, I took epilepsy. Financially, we just ruined. We did get to keep our house because there's no equity on it. That's the one saving grace.
What impact did all of this have on your family?
Well, myself with the epilepsy and the fear of going out, I didn't come out of the house for about 3 years. When I did go out, I would have crossed the street if I'd seen anybody that I knew from the area, and I would put my head down and would just walk on. Even taking the epilepsy, I couldn't drive for a year, so therefore I was stuck in the house. And the only company I had was the dog, Toby, and he seemed to get me through it. Might sound stupid, throwing, but somebody had to talk to somebody.
What about your husband?
Darius, he had to go through it all on his own up in Killeator. He had to deal with the people talking behind our backs, face them. He was my rock. Then he's got high blood pressure at this stage now, but it's all take effect. His son and daughter both anxiety because they watched what happened to me.
You've mentioned your epilepsy.
Yeah.
What other impacts did this have on your health and your mental health?
Well, mental health. My mental health will never be the same again. Constant tablets. Well, I actually did go to a life coach who has helped me, give me coping techniques, which I do use, try and use. Medically, I'm going to be on the epilepsy tablets for the rest of my life, a label. You're just always waiting on a seizure. You just don't know when.
What do you want from the post office now?
Accountability. accountability. I would like an apology, but that's long past that.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the chair?
I have a statement, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah.
So, thank you for coming to Northern Ireland to hear our stories. On the 2nd of June 2010, my life changed drastically, thanks to the Post Office. I have lost 12 years of my life, and my children, Gemma and Sean, lost the independent, happy-go-lucky mother they knew. My husband, Darius, lost a vibrant moment. He married in 1991. The Post Office made us use a computer system that they knew was not fit for purpose. They told each and every accused sub-postmaster who experienced problems that they were the only one this had happened to. This was untrue. They used trainers to do so-called audits. They used bully boy tactics in their fraud interviews, interrogations, and I want those people in authority who gave the order to treat all sub-postmasters like criminals to be punished, especially in my case, when the Post Office investigators threatened my life and security and the lives and security of my family when they suggested that I took the money for paramilitaries. I want all sub-postmasters to be compensated fairly, especially the 555 who so bravely opened up their lives to scrutiny when they went to litigation. We need this so that we can all move on with what is left of our lives. I should be in the position now that I could spend more time with my newborn grandson, but I can't afford to take time off work. I'm living week to week financially. On the 1st of January 2021, I had a breakdown. I knew I had to get help. I want accountability. A lot of people in senior positions knew what was going on and did nothing to stop it. I want those people in authority who decided to hide evidence that showed the system was faulty to be prosecuted. The Post Office ruined my life physically and mentally. I want to be able to wake up every morning and not be thinking of Post Office. I want and need closure, Sir One.
Can I just ask you one or two questions?
Yeah.
First of all, I think you were one of the 555. Yeah?
I was, yeah.
Fine. And then you described this incident in June 2010, the audit and so forth. Before that, had you had trouble dealing with Horizon? Had you had shortfalls? What sort of picture was it?
There was shortfalls, but they weren't big. I put it down to counting the lotto, because it was in the shop, and I thought counting the lotto and the scratch cards wrong or something like that. That's what I put it down to.
Some people have described shortfalls of say up to about £50 as being not very much.
Yeah, same.
Same
yeah.
with you.
Same,
all right,
yes.
fine, that's fine. So this large shortfall literally came out of the blue, as far as you can say. Fine.
Can I also say, so on the outreach sites that I went to, the telecommunications would have dropped. So when you were putting a transaction through, you could have been swiping it twice, 3 times, because it kept declining.
Yeah.
And a number of times it had to be changed, the computer had to be changed, but I have no record of that, or I have no record of anything else. And BT engineers had come out to the phone lines and the different sites.
Well, we've heard similar accounts to that from people from all different parts of the country. Yeah. All right, well, thanks so much for coming to give evidence.
Thank you.
It's difficult, I know, but you got through it and you're fine. So thanks again.
Thank you, Sir Mum.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to take a few minutes break now because we're not actually pressed very much for time this afternoon. So we'll take a few minutes and reconvene when everyone's ready.
Chair, our next witness is Mrs. Early.
I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
could you confirm your full name, please?
It's Heather Early.
And in front of you, you should have a witness statement. Is that your witness statement that you prepared for the inquiry?
It is.
And it should run to 16 pages.
Yes,
And is that your signature on the last page?
it is. Yes,
Have you read through this statement recently? And is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
it is.
I'm going to start by asking a few questions about you. How old are you?
58.
And who do you live with?
I live with my husband.
Whereabouts in Northern Ireland do you live?
I live in Newton Abbey.
How many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
And how long have you lived where you are currently living?
Probably about 32 years.
Before you became a Subpost mistress, what kind of work did you do?
I always worked in accounts. I worked for a company for 28 years and worked my way from receptionist up to manager for accounts.
Why did you decide to leave that and work for the post office?
Well, we were out for a drive one day, and where I used to live in Mossley, the shop, which was really the heart of the community, had closed down, and we were driving past it, and I said it'd be nice to do something completely different, something that would take me into retirement, and I was just getting to the stage that I wanted a complete break from office work and just move into something different, so we applied for the shop.
And how did you feel about taking over that shop?
I was excited because I grew up in Mossley most of my life, from the age of 7 I've lived there, and I knew everybody and everybody knew me, and really at the end of the day we wanted to, because we knew everyone, the shop would have been easy.
And who did you employ in your post office?
It was mainly all family, believe it. It was my daughter-in-law worked full time with me, and my son and my other daughter would have come in and out when they could to help out, and my oldest daughter would have helped as well.
What training did you receive when you took over?
We were known as a post office local, which meant we only got like 5 days, but 3 days were just us and the trainer, and 2 days was when it was actually customers. But what you have to remember is our shop was already there, and we were already trying to serve people in the shop. So some people maybe stand at the shop and the trainer's trying to train you, and there's only 2 of you, and you're trying to run from one end of the counter to the other because you're trying to keep the customers come to the shop as well as try and train.
How adequate did you feel the training was that you received?
It wasn't very good because I expected to be took to a classroom at some stage and trained properly, but that never happened. And when he was doing his training at first, I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't understand the system, constantly. He maybe would have showed you postage, he might have showed you parcels, he might have showed you cash withdrawals, but anything other than that, I hadn't got a clue.
When you say the system, do you mean Horizon?
Yes, I mean Horizon, yes.
Did you use the helpline at all?
I used it quite a lot, yes. I'm the type of person, if I ring the helpline, that I take a name and a number. And every time I'd rang back, that person you asked for was never available, or they didn't really know who they were. You were just constantly hitting your head off a brick wall.
How quickly did you start to notice shortfalls?
Well, we didn't know there were shortfalls at the beginning because when our trainer was even there, we found that even the first day he'd done the cash declaration with us, it was wrong. And he says, "Oh, don't worry about that. When you start up and running, then everything will work out fine." And we just felt that every day we done the cash declaration, it was never right. We never got a zero. We always had maybe £50 out, maybe £100 out, maybe £2 out. But I was constantly lifting it from the till of the shop and putting it in, because my whole fear was working in accounts, you're always making sure everything's right. I constantly would have looked for 1p if it was out. So it was just me, myself. It was very particular on where this money was, and I just couldn't find it. And I kept thinking, well, tomorrow will be another day, it'll be different, and maybe put it back in again. But it didn't.
I think you mentioned in your statement between November and December 2013 there was a big shortfall, which I think was caused by a woman who was withdrawing money. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we had a girl who had come into the shop, and like anything, if anyone comes in for a cash withdrawal, they put the card in the machine the other side of the counter. They say to you how much they want, and you do it on the system and you hand over the money. But where the system was always showing red for not doing something or green for doing something, it was yellow, and it was really weird because I'd never seen it before. So I rang the helpline and said, no, what does this yellow mean? You know, it just seems a bit strange. And they said, oh, it's okay, nothing to worry about, carry on. So the girl kept coming in every single day. It started with £50, and then it was £100, and then it was £500. And I started then to get really suspicious. And I rang the post office and I says, look, I think this is a suspicious activity and I'm reporting it, and could you check it out? And they says, no, everything seems fine with me. No, carry on, just. I says, no, but it's not right. There's something just not right. The girl would have come into the shop with change to buy cigarettes, and here she was lifting all this money every day, and it didn't add up. So at the end of my balance in December, it was over £10,000 out, and I rang the post office and I says, there's no way. I says, it has to be something to do with that card. And one of the times, just after Christmas, she came in with the card again. It must have been a piece of dirt or something. And I took the card off her to try and help her. And I looked at the card, and it was a strange card I had never seen. It was at no local bank, it was no national bank, it was a strange card. And I remember sort of in my head thinking, I must look at that when I get home. So when I got home, I investigated a wee bit more myself and found it was actually a pay-in card. So when the girl was coming and asking me for £50, she was really getting 100 because £50 went back into her account. So what she got out, she got back in again very quickly, and that's why she was able to come every day and lift money. Because if she lifted £500, £500 was going into her bank account, and I was out £1,000. So I reported it to the post office, and they says, no, everything fine again. I says, look, it's not fine. I says, I don't have £10,000. And they says, well, if you're not happy with it, ring the police. So I did, because I wasn't happy. And the police came up to the shop and told them all what happened. And firstly, they couldn't get their head around what I was trying to tell them. I says, look, there's something with the system, or there's something with her card maybe making this happen. I don't know. But they says, look, we've got her name, we'll try and find out where she lives. And so they took her name, and they couldn't find where she lived. And she was in my shop every day. She lived local, and they couldn't find her. But I'd seen her going into a house one day, and I rang the police and said, look, she must live around this area. So they did come, and they arrested her. And I contacted the post office and told them all this. I says, the police are looking at the paperwork to see if they can look at the transactions that this girl has done to see, where the money has went. And the post office says, no, we can't give that to you due to data protection. They asked would an inspector would have to get a summons to ask for this. And 3 months later, I'm still on the phone trying to sort it out. I'm still out this money. Post office start telling me I have to pay it all back. They started to take it from my remuneration. They started to ask me for the money, and in the meantime, my declaration every day was still wrong. Eventually, they got the girl. She pleaded guilty.
Excuse me, before we get there, just so that I'm clear about what was happening, the person was using a card.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Horizon, the computer system,
Yeah.
was authorising
Made
you to pay the money she was asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
But at the same time was crediting her account. I followed that much.
Yeah.
But you said something about there being a green for go, red for stop, and a yellow.
When
And
you
I want to explore the amber if I can. All right? What does that mean?
When you look at the screen, there was always a line green, then it says to pay.
Right?
And then if something come up red, there was something wrong
Yeah.
with the
So
transaction.
don't pay.
But it came up yellow, and I had never seen it before. And I said pay, but it was in yellow. and I had asked the post office what.
So that's the bit I didn't understand. It was still authorising you to pay,
Yeah.
but it was a different colour from what you normally
Yeah.
had on your machine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you now, thanks.
How much money did the post office take from you or deduct from you because of this?
Well, they made me pay back the 10,000 odd pound. They also said that I was stamps short one time when they came and done an audit. I told them they were Christmas stamps and I had posted them back. They said they had no record of them and they were probably shredded by now. And I says, well, you know, I definitely put them back in, and I looked for the receipt, and I'm very meticulous about receipts. I would keep them nearly forever, but I could not find the receipt. And I kept saying, like, there's bound to be something on the system when the post, whoever was collecting the postage stamps that day would have scanned, you know, to tell me that they got them stamps back. No, there's nothing, you have to pay that back. So I had to pay that back there and then. Or they says, look, we're going to close you down if you don't pay £112. I says, £112? I says, I have paid back thousands to you, and £112 you're going to close my doors. And they says, yeah, well, if you pay it now, we'll keep your doors open. But I was afraid of losing the post office for the people in the community. The elderly people needed the post office. The people in the area needed the shop. And if one went, the other was going to go. But I just couldn't afford to start constantly lifting money out of my till into the post office.
How much money in total do you think you paid into the post office?
I couldn't honestly tell you on a daily basis how much that was. But all I know that what I had to pay to keep my head above water was nearly £50,000.
You mentioned in your statement that you underwent some audits. Could you tell us about how you found the audits?
Well, they put a sign up to say they're doing an audit, and we were a busy shop, and people were coming in and trying to use the convenience store part. And I'm talking the length of that table. The shop was there, the post office was there. You know, they kept on saying, why is your post office not open? Is there something wrong with your post office? I just know they're doing an audit. But if you don't pay whatever's missing, they close you down. They take the keys, and I didn't want that to happen.
What did you decide to do eventually?
Eventually, when the girl had went to court and she pleaded guilty for what she'd done, we went in, my husband and I went into a side room where the public prosecution was there, and they says, you may thank yourself lucky that she pleaded guilty. And I says, why? He says, because these folders here are all about the post office. And I says, but what do you mean? He says, have you heard of Panorama? And I go, yeah, I have, but I don't know nothing to do. I don't know what these files are for. He says, well, if she hadn't pleaded guilty, you'd have been up against the post office. That's why I'm here today.
And what happened to your post office?
Well, enough was enough, and I couldn't cope anymore. I was getting loans of family members. I was using my credit cards. I had 3 credit cards maxed just to get stock for the shop. And I wasn't even telling my husband half the things that was going on. I just felt that I was trying to deal with it, and I felt that at the time I was strong enough to deal with it, but I wasn't. Sorry.
It's okay. Please don't apologise.
So I decided if I stop the post office and hand my notice in that maybe the shop would survive on its own, but it never was. You know, people would have come in and said, why are you closing your post office? And I'm going, look, it was my decision, it's not the post office decision. Oh, you know, my mummy needs this post office for her pension. She lives beside the post office, and you're closing it down. And the people who really knew me knew that I wasn't that type of person, you know, because I grew up in the area. But these are people who have come into the area over the years who didn't know me and just felt it was my fault.
How did it feel hearing people say things like that to you?
I was gutted. It was horrendous what me and my family went through.
I'm now going to ask you some questions about the impact that all of this has had on you. You just mentioned your family a moment ago. What impact has this had on your family?
Well, as I say, my daughter-in-law worked there full time. Her and my son weren't long married, and they obviously had to pay back a wedding. They were paying for a wedding, and the new child coming along, and you know, she didn't have a job. My oldest daughter was a one-parent family, and she had another job, but we tried to help her out the best we could with that job. And my youngest daughter was going to university, and we just couldn't afford it.
What about your ties to the community? How do you think it affected those?
I can honestly say I think I've drove past the shop twice, 3 times. I don't go near the shop. I don't go near the area. We done so much for the shop and the community when we had it. We'd have had Santa Grottos for the children in the area, just to bring people in, and they all loved it. But I live on the main road, and I live beside, well, it's not far from where the shop would be, the post office. I'm in the front garden, and I know somebody going down the hill that walked into the post office. I would go round the back. I wouldn't even like to meet people. I find it hard to sleep. I ended up with rosacea. It caused my face to break out. I had to get biopsies done to my face. And this was all through stress. It was just, I was in a very dark place.
What about your relationship with your husband?
Well, I felt at the time that if I was telling him things, it was an added pressure, because not only I was trying to cope with it all myself and keep so much from my children, but as much as a help, he sort of would have asked, why did you not see that coming, type of thing, or, you know, where is the money? If you know where the money is, where is it? You know, but I think all that, I was trying to cope with it before I'd have to go that far, but I had to tell him in the end, because he went to a bank account one day and there was nothing in it, because I had to use it for the shop.
What about your work? What kind of jobs do you do now?
When I first closed the shop, I worked for taking photographs of babies in the hospital. It was all minimum wage. I then worked for security in the airport, which is minimum wage. I'm now back in an office, but I have, with all what's going on here, I'm actually out of stress at the minute, because I just can't cope, and I don't really want to go back to reliving that time again. I'm trying to put it behind me, and I've even said to my family, they go, no, you need to go and speak, you need to tell people your story, and I go, I don't want to do it. And I know there's other people out there who feel the same way I do, and they need to come forward, they need to tell people their story, because at the end of the day, Sir Wynne has very nicely came and listened to us, and I thank him for that.
What do you want from the post office now?
I want them to be held accountable for what they've done, for what they've put me and my family and the community through. Not just me, like, but you know, there's people who's been sitting around tables making decisions about small post offices, and you know, where did my money go? Who has my money? You know, somebody must be sitting me a pot of gold somewhere.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the chair?
Yes, I would.
Before we get to that,
Yes.
I just want to go back, if I may, to the issue of the amount that you paid to the post office,
Yeah.
in effect, because that woman had stolen money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they deducted money from your salary. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To get the money that they said was gone. And how much actually did you pay? Can you remember?
They took 4 out of my wages, and I had to pay 6. So it's 10,000.
Right, okay. And there came a point in time when she was convicted.
Yeah.
So it was clear to the world
Yeah.
that it was her, not you.
I
Right.
actually went back to the post office.
Well, that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about.
Yeah.
Did you say to the post office, well, look, hang on, this woman has now been convicted of doing this. Can I have the money, please?
Yeah, I called them after the hearing was finished.
Yeah.
And I said, look, we've just had the hearing, the girl has been found guilty, she's pleaded guilty, can I have my money back? And he says, no, we're satisfied with what we have. You're not getting it back, type of thing. And I go, but I didn't take the money. They actually at one time accused me, because I knew that I was involved in it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. And I had to actually use At 55, I realised I could actually cash in some pension money, and I cashed in £50,000 to keep my house because my husband and I were both, our names were on the post office and the shop and the house, and that was the only way of keeping my house.
So, in short, the post office refused to return the money to you?
Uh-huh.
Right, fine. Right, you wanted to read a
Right,
statement to
sorry.
me. I distracted you.
No,
Sorry.
you're okay. So, thank you very much for coming to Northern Ireland and listening to everyone today. I would like the people responsible in the post office and in the government to be held accountable for what they did and what they did not do. I want them to be held responsible for the stress that me and my family have gone through financially and mentally. Sorry. We have suffered for too long. I had to cash in monies from my hard-earned pension pot to save our house and pay off debts and loans. This was the only way we could see a light at the end of a very long tunnel. Not only did my family suffer, but my community suffered. They lost their post office and local shop, which a lot of elderly people depended on. Justice needs to be served, and I would like you, on our behalf, do all you can that justice is done.
Thank you, Mrs. Early. I'm very grateful for you coming to give this evidence. It's always a strain, but you've done it, so that's good, isn't it? And I think I'd just like to say that it would be very easy for me to think that all these stories are similar, but what your evidence has just demonstrated, as with so many other people's evidence, that there's always something unique about what you have to say. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, another short break, and then the next witness.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Blake.
Miss Rainey, could you give your full name, please?
Yep, it's Sinead Rainey.
You should have in front of you a witness statement. It's dated the 15th of May. I'm going to ask for you to be sworn before I start. Thank you.
I swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Take a seat.
Thank you very much. So in front of you, there should be a witness statement that's dated the 15th of May of this year. Is that right?
Yep.
I think that's 18 pages in length, and at the back you should see a signature.
Yep.
And can you confirm that that's your signature?
Yep.
And is that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yep.
Thank you. Can you tell us where you're from?
From Moneyglass, outside Tunbridge, County Antrim, here.
And can you give us an idea of what it's like there, the size, community?
It's a very small, rural community. It's made up of a bunch of wee townlands that all kind of form together and congregate, I suppose, in Moneyglass. It's probably the biggest one of them, so that's the one that's probably most well known by.
And what was your first job?
I started working when I was 12 years of age in the wee spar. It was a spar at that time, down the road from me. That's the same shop as I went on to own in the future.
For those of us who don't know SPAR, can you tell us what is SPAR?
So spar is it's realistically just convenience, small convenience stores. There's hundreds of them in Northern Ireland and all around the world in Europe. They're mainly supplied by the Henderson Group here in Belfast.
And you worked there while you're at school.
Yep.
And what do you do when you finish school?
I was supposed to go to, I went to the tech and it didn't really work out for me, so I decided I liked the shop better, and the man that owned the shop, he thought I really excelled in the shop, and he thought it would be really good for me to go and work for Henderson's themselves.
in their own company-owned stores. So that's what I did. I went and worked for Henderson Retail for approximately 10 years then.
And what did you do after that?
Baby number 2 came along, and while I was on my maternity leave, I came up with this great idea that there was nowhere kind of around home, and specifically in Toome Village, for young children. So I decided I would open a wee cafe and ice cream shop. And I did that, and it was going absolutely fantastic for me. And then I was there for about 2 years, and the man that owned the Spar that I started working in then, when I was 12, he approached me and asked me then would I be interested in taking on the Spar, because he was thinking of retiring.
And how did you feel being offered that opportunity?
It's a dream come true to me. I always said the shop was the love of my life, even whenever I worked for Henderson's. If I could, at busy times of the year like Christmas, Easter, things like that, if I was off, I was sure to be in Money Glass shop. It wasn't just work. The owner and his daughters were my best friends. It was all about knowing everybody in the community, and I was totally at my happiest in that building.
And presumably you had to pay for it.
I did.
Do you remember how much it cost?
£16,000.
And how did you manage to pay for that?
We borrowed money out of the credit union. We sold a lot of our stuff out of our ice cream shop, and my father lent me some money to go towards paying for it.
And in terms of the stock for the Spar,
Yep.
I think Henderson Group have some sort
Yep.
of arrangement, is
Yeah,
that right?
so when you are taking on a new business, Henderson's help you finance it. So they give us a £10,000 stock loan to get the shop filled with the products that I wanted in it. And then they give me a £20,000 loan to do the renovations that I wanted to do within the shop as well. Put in new till systems, new refrigeration, new shelving all through the shop, and just update it because it hadn't been updated in a long time.
And the post office was based in the Spar?
Yeah. Years ago, whenever I was younger, it was in a wee separate building, or a wee separate room at the back. But as everyone's probably aware, post office now is like on the end of your counter. So it was a very, very small shop that I had. My till was literally there, and the post office was there. It was basically on the one counter, no more than a metre apart.
And when you purchased the Spar, did you also purchase the post office counter?
No. I purchased the shop only. I never became postmaster. I was told by the man that I bought it off, he assured me that I would get settled in the shop, and once I get settled in the shop, then we would start that kind of process, but it never happened.
And was the sub-postmaster involved in the running of the post office?
No, not from the day and hour I went there, no.
And what was your role in relation to the post office?
Well, basically the customers want it served at the post office. So when I bought the shop, his full-time member of staff that had worked for him transferred over to me, and she was really the brains of the operation at that stage because I had never used it before. She taught me how to do cash withdrawals and deposits, and pensions, and selling stamps, and that was really the extent of the business in it anyway, because we weren't doing car tax, any of those other things, high value things. It was really just depositing and withdrawing cash and stamps. So she taught me.
And I'm going to ask you about discrepancies. When did you notice any discrepancies?
Well, the first discrepancy that comes to my mind is I was due to take over in the shop on the Monday morning, and on the Sunday night, myself and my husband and the previous owner and his family met at the shop to do a stock take, and we counted all the stock in the shop, and while we were counting the stock in the shop, him and his daughter were doing a balance in the post office, and they told us that the post office was £1,000 short that night, and that they put £1,000 into it. So Sinead, don't worry, you're starting fresh tomorrow. It's perfect. So I said, right, okay. So it's a week or maybe 2 weeks later, then it was big balance time. So his daughter came over and she did the balance. No, I did the balance, sorry, first of all, and I was getting it really wrong. So I rang her and she came over and she did the balance, and yet we were getting it £3,500 short. So she was like, oh, it can't be £3,500 short, Sinead. So she basically went on the system. I didn't know how to do anything on the system. I didn't know how to reverse sell in a stamp. So she pushed away the buttons and she says, I've took Daddy's £1,000 back, but it's still owed £1,000. She'll need to put that £1,000 in. So I was like, right, okay. So that's what I did. Put £1,000 in to get it back to zero again.
How did you pay that money?
Out of my shop, straight out of my takings.
Did you speak to the post office when you noticed those discrepancies?
I had no contact with post office. As far as they were aware, I didn't exist. They thought the post office was still being managed and run by the postmaster, not me. I had no contact details, phone numbers, nothing. I didn't know who to speak to. Then over time, I kept this wee money bag just in the drawer beside the post office till. One day it would be £50 over, so I'd take the £50 out and put it in the money bag. The next day it would be £80 short, so I put the £50 in plus £30 out of my own till. And that went on and on and on till there was no money left in the bag. So then I was just feeding it constantly.
And was that from 2016, 2017 period?
Oh, right from the get-go, really.
And were there larger shortfalls at some stage?
There was one night I did the I don't know what the official term is for it, but the count in the afternoon, and it said it was £2,000 short. And the next day when I counted it in the afternoon again, it had jumped to £8,000. It was now £10,000 short. And I remember coming home and saying that to my husband, and we just were like, no more. Absolutely, no more. So I never put any more money into it from then.
I'm going to move on to an audit which took place on the 1st of May 2019. Do you know why the post office auditors attended?
No idea.
And did they find a discrepancy?
Yep. So basically that morning I left my wains off to school and I walked down to the shop and it was about 9 o'clock and I opened the door and there was these two ladies standing and they said to me, Sinead, we're here to audit the post office. I understand you're not the postmaster, but can you let us in to do it? And they handed me a wee card with a phone number I was to ring to get authorisation to let them go in. And I did that. And in the meantime, I also texted the postmaster's daughter to let them know that there was somebody there to do an audit. So I did all that. I got them in. I left them to it. Again, I said to them, you know, I'm not the postmaster. If you need him or whatever, I'll get him for you. I'll try to get him for you. So they just tore on and went through their audit. The postmaster hadn't arrived at that stage before they had finished tallying it up, and they come to me and they called me into the office and they said to me, Sinead, have you got any more money belonging to the post office? I was like, no, but you must have more money belonging to the post office. I said, I don't have any money belonging to the post office. Why, what's it saying or whatever? And they said to me, there's a discrepancy here of 63,000.
And on finding out that it was £63,000, how did you feel?
I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. It's a complete blur how I stayed on my feet. I don't know how I did, to be honest.
And can you describe the conversation with the auditors at that stage?
They just kept on at me. You must have money, you need to get the postmaster here. But, you know, this discrepancy has to be accounted for. And I always knew from my years of working in the shop, even as a child, I was very much aware that it was always kind of put across to me that if there was money ever missing in a post office, it was, the way it was always put to me was, it was like stealing nearly off the Queen, that you would go to prison, it had to be repaid. I didn't really know what I was going to do. It was a complete disaster.
Did the auditors speak to the sub-postmaster at some stage?
Yep. I tried to ring him, I couldn't get him, and I rang his daughter's shop then, and I got her, and I said to her, you know, these auditors are here, they found a discrepancy, they want your daddy to come up, so that was fine, he came up. I just was left kind of loitering around my shop, not really knowing how to even speak at that stage, and pretending to my customers that everything was okay. I went out, I remember going outside the shop and I rung Mommy, and I said to Mommy, I'm going to be arrested today. And she was like, what? And I was like, I can't really speak to you, but look after my wains. And I just hung up on her. And I rung Darren, my husband, and I said to him, like, they're looking £63,000 off me. Where the hell am I going to get that? And I literally hung up the phone from him too. Postmaster arrived. I expected to be brought into that conversation. I wasn't brought into that conversation. I was still left hanging on outside the room. And the next thing, he walked out past me. And the auditor said to me, Sinead, you've got an hour to get as much money into that safe. I'll be locking that safe in an hour, and you've got an hour to get as much money in there as you possibly can. Whatever money you can put in there will be deducted off the total discrepancy.
And what did you say to the auditor?
I just wanted to run at that time, really. I was like, get me out of here. But at the same time, I didn't even think I could drive to get out of there. I just was like, okay, shell-shocked. Don't really know how to describe to you how I felt, but I got into the car and I drove home, and I lifted a bucket in my house and I emptied my Wayne's money boxes into them, and I emptied my own purse and any money that I had in the house. 2p's, 5p's, everything went into this bucket. And the next thing, Mommy and Daddy arrived, and I didn't know it until then, but Darren, my husband, had rang them, and they had went to Ballymena and withdrew as much money as they could out of all their own bank accounts. But they couldn't get enough, so they rang two of my uncles, and they did the same. And my sister, I stopped her like on her way over to, this all happened and she was on her way to her shop to lodge her own takings, and she gave me her takings. So I don't know the exact figure because I never got a receipt, but somewhere in the region of £42,000 was in that bucket.
And that's £42,000 of cash being carried in a bucket.
Yep.
And where did that bucket go?
I couldn't drive at that stage, so I got my sister to drive me down to the shop, and I carried that bucket in. And the auditors made me stand there and watch them count it and tot it, and made me feel so lousy for bringing them all these pennies. But I brought them wherever I could.
But there was still money outstanding, given that it was around £63,000 discrepancy,
Yep.
or allegedly outstanding. What happened to your post office then?
So about that stage then, the postmaster, he had to come back again. They closed themselves in the office, and I don't have a clue what was said. But the next thing, they come out and they said to me, Sinead, I need your keys. And I was like, right, okay. So I gave them the keys, and they were like, as of now, this post office suspended. Stuck a big ugly notice up on the counter telling my customers to go to the post office down in Toom. And they basically said to me that day, we will liaise with Martin, the postmaster, and he will liaise with you. And walked out of the shop, and I've never heard a word from either. Well, that's not true. Never heard a word from the post office since. The next day, I was sitting in my kitchen. I can't remember. I think my husband came to get me from the shop that day, and I went home and I cried, and my weans, I was like crying sore. My weans had never seen me cry before. Didn't understand. I was trying to hide it from them. I didn't understand. Mum and Daddy come up. They didn't understand. Again, I didn't understand. I couldn't even tell them what had happened because I didn't know. And my uncle that night came up to me and he said to me, this is ringing a bell to me. And I was like, what's ringing a bell to you? And he said, I think I've heard this on the radio before, something about the post office. And I said to him, what do you mean? And he was like, there's some woman in Northern Ireland who has been wrongfully accused by the post office. You need to find her. So there was him and my husband and me and my sister sitting Googling, tears wrecking us, trying to make sense of this whole thing. And I found her. It was Deirdre Connolly. And I remember I messaged Deirdre that night and she said to me, ring me. And I rang her. And it was only then that I thought, jeez, this can't happen, like, this has happened. I'm not on my own. She understood. She understood probably more than me because I didn't. And it was such relief to have Deirdre because she was the one person who really believed me because she'd been through pretty much the same thing. So Deirdre gave me the phone number of a barrister, I think it was, in Derry. And I said, right, I was talking to her till the middle of the night nearly. And I said, right, I'll get up in the morning and I'll ring. So I never slept a wink the whole night. And first thing the next morning, I got on the phone and I was waiting on someone to ring me back. And the next thing, the postmaster, Martin, and his daughter arrived in my yard. And Martin never got out of the car, but his daughter, Martina, did. And she just came on into my house. And she says to me, the post office doesn't have the money. Daddy doesn't have the money. And I said, so are you saying I have the money? And she was like, well, if we don't get this money, I'm going to have to report you to the police. And I said, do it. I've got nothing to hide.
If I could stop you there. You started your evidence by saying that they were family friends or close friends of yours.
Yeah. Well, they totally were.
How?
We lived, like, literally together.
And how was the relationship by that point?
Oh, I didn't know who they were. And they were looking at me like they didn't know who I was. How did we end up in this mess together? I don't know.
And at one point, the police did become involved.
Oh, yeah. So I can't remember timescales. It's a blur. But I got a letter, I think, to come and attend Antrim Serious Crime Suite. I was being investigated for theft and fraud. So I went and I gathered up, they wanted all my financial records and everything, and I gathered the whole thing up and I took it up and I spent like the whole day with them. And then they told me that they would let me know the results of their investigation. And they must have, it was somewhere in around 8 weeks of torment, waiting for them to ring me. Because at this stage I knew what was going on in England. And I thought all these other people have all faced prison and all these things for something they never done. This is exactly what's coming my way. But I remember one Sunday morning, I was in bed, phone rang at 8:30. I ran up the hall because I thought to myself, who else will be ringing here at 8:30? And it came up on the phone, no caller ID, so I thought, right, this is Sam. And I answered the phone, and it was Constable Logan from Antrim Police Station, and she said, Sinead, I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting for so long. And I was like, it's okay. And she said, I just want to let you know that there's no evidence. We haven't been able to find any evidence of theft or fraud. And I would strongly advise you to try and put this behind you. I said, I never be able to put this behind me. And she said to me, and mind it, it's clear as day, she said, are you aware of the post office case in England? I says, I am now. And she said, you go after that. And I said, oh, I will.
And I want to ask you about the impact on yourself and your family. How were you at the time when you started finding discrepancies?
At the time, whenever I started finding discrepancies, I thought, well, this thing's clearly, there's something seriously wrong. But in my head, having worked in retail my whole life for the Henderson Group, there wasn't a button I could have pushed on my till in the shop that Hendersons weren't aware of. So I thought, they can see this is wrong. They're going to come. They're going to come looking for it. So I think at that stage, at the very beginning, I thought, oh, well, somebody will come and they'll investigate this or whatever. But as time went on, it just was slowly sucking the life out of me. It took me from loving my shop with my whole heart, and more than that, if possible, till it just, I couldn't, every day was a struggle.
And on being accused of responsibility for those shortfalls, how did you feel?
I just couldn't understand. How would I be accused of anything? Number one, nobody ever showed me how to use the system. I had no training. I didn't own the thing. How did this come to me? Like, how did someone come walking into my shop and take all of my money, my family's money, off me, and know that I had nothing to do with it?
How was your business impacted?
My footfall just fell overnight. Post office drove. It's a small, real small area. Great people, but it just, my footfall fell away, and I had no cash flow anymore. I give it all to the post office. I had nowhere to go. Me and my husband never had a credit card in our lives. We took credit cards out to try and stock the shop. We took a £20,000 loan from WorldPay, who supplied me with my credit card machine in the shop, to try and get us back afloat. I just couldn't do it.
And how about your reputation?
It's in the gutter. Like, overnight. People asking me why Sinead, why is it gone? What happened? I don't know. There's only so many times you can tell people that you don't know until they start thinking, she knows something. I didn't know anything.
We've heard that you borrowed money from family. How did it affect your relationship with your family?
It's horrific. So that day, 2 of my uncles gave me money. Oh, I'm so grateful. But they couldn't be out that money forever either. And I told them I would do everything to get it back to them. But they needed it. Their own children to put through university, and one of them lost his wife very young, so they needed their money. So they didn't put pressure on me, but they put pressure on my father to get the money back. I only found out in this last couple of days. One of them told Daddy if he didn't get his money back, he would double it for interest. So Daddy had to go then. My Daddy's 75 this year, and he's a farmer, and he should be retired and travelling and doing the things he'd never done because the farm kept him so busy. And he took all his money to pay my 2 uncles back. there's no relationship there anymore. I don't speak to Daddy. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at them again, but I owe them so much. Number one, they told me about Deirdre. Number two, they tried to help me that day. Hindsight, wish to God I never took a penny off them. But they would have done anything for me, and I owe them so much for that. And I don't know I don't know if it's ever going to be salvageable. My sisters are great. My brothers not so much. They feel, I think that Daddy gave me their share of their inheritance. And they've made that pretty clear to me. One of their wives has told prospective employers, I can't be trusted. I'll ruin their business. Ask anybody. That's the kind of things my family think about me.
How about your health? Has that been impacted?
My mental health, I don't think I have any real quality of mental health left. I'm on my third round of counselling. I'm on the highest antidepressant the doctor can give me. He can change it, but I have to be weaned off the one I'm on. And with that comes a severe dark hole that I can't get myself into because I might not get out of. I don't go anywhere. I don't do anything. I don't take my kids to the shop. I don't walk my way into school. I don't go to their sports days. I don't go to their sports. I don't go anywhere. I don't even visit my own mother and father-in-law because I feel like I let them down because I wrecked their son's life too because of what happened to me. I will never be the person I was before. I was the organiser. I was the one that provided the crack. Never.
Is there anything that you would like to say to the chair?
Yes, please.
Of course.
Thank you to everyone for coming today to listen to my story. All I ever wanted to do is let my customers, my friends and my family know what exactly happened to me and my business. Today I have been given the opportunity, so please accept my sincere gratitude. Imagine trying to explain the situation to your family that you don't even understand yourself. This resulted in some family doubting me, which in turn affected my parents and dramatically put pressure on our relationship. It created barriers that did not exist before and could not be taken down until the full impact and truth of the situation was revealed here today. My husband and my children lost the funny, happy, strong wife and mummy they know. It happened overnight. The day the post office auditors said I had a massive shortfall was the day my children saw me crying for the first time. Unfortunately, they've seen me crying a lot since. A mummy not able to take them to school, take them to the shop, buy them treats, go on day trips, or buy them a new First Holy Communion outfit. All because I can't face my community. I've no money, and I can't physically put my feet out the door. My husband lost me. I'm a shadow, who he keeps encouraging to come back into the light. He has seen me crumble and get back up, and then crumble again. A constant struggle, still being fought today. He has my back the entire time. Without him and my children, I dread to think where I would be. I lost one of the greatest loves of my life that day. My shop, the place I grew up, established my friendships, built my reputation in, place I wanted to build my future in. I put everything into that shop. I told my husband it was my first love. I invested heavily, financially, with the hopes and dreams of giving something great back to my community, my people. The post office hemorrhaged my cash flow, leaving me with enormous debts relating to loans for upgrading my shop, covering the shortfall the day the post office auditors came. In the space of a few hours, I owed over £120,000 with no income to repay it. A situation I had never been in. I never owed money to anyone. I didn't deserve this. I was trapped with no one to help me, nowhere to turn. I am honest and heartbroken. I had my whole dream in front of me. Why was it taken from me? Why should my parents suffer this stress and worry in their retirement? They shouldn't. I need their money back. I need my parents to see me and my family can be happy again. I need my children to see that their mummy can be happy again. I need to be happy again. I want us to have the life we should have had before this nightmare began. Thank you.
Mrs. Rainey, many people now have sat in a witness box just like that and thanked me for listening to them. The truth is, that's the wrong way round. I should be thanking you all for coming here to speak to me. And that is what I now do to you and to everyone else. Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and
Yep.
then there are some statements that are going to be read.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
And you'll be glad to know that I've been provided with a running order, and my team is very happy that I should follow it. And I'm in your hands about the number of summaries that you decide to read, all right?
Yes, I hope we have the same running order.
Yeah.
I would start by saying, sir, and you demonstrate this afternoon, that you and your panel read very carefully all of the witness statements that have been submitted to you. And although I'm reading summaries, you have very carefully studied the full witness statements of all the witnesses. Sir, I'd like to start with Mrs. Catherine McIlerney, who was the sub-postmaster of Leitrim Post Office from August 2000 to January 2008. From the premises, she also operated a shop and a pub. It was a vital part of the tight-knit community. The post office was also her home. Catherine says that the training on the Horizon system was horrendous. Catherine was not given any advice or training on how to investigate discrepancies that could arise when balancing. Catherine was advised by the post office to contact the helpline if she had problems. In 2007, Catherine was heavily pregnant with her fourth child as she experienced a shortfall of £30,000. She called the helpline seeking urgent assistance. Initially, she was palmed off with promises of a correction notice. The shortfall miraculously reduced to £3,000. However, Catherine's call to the helpline triggered an audit, which found an alleged shortfall of £10,587.44. Catherine was aggressively interrogated by post office auditors in full view of her customers and whilst heavily pregnant. In her small, close-knit community, word soon got out. She underwent 2 further interviews under caution, from which her solicitor was excluded. She says the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters was useless. Catherine was suspended, the keys of her branch taken from her, and she was she has never been back. The loss of the post office shop was a real blow for her local community. The loss of this vital amenity caused ill will towards Catherine. Catherine has subsequently discovered, through a Freedom of Information Act request, that the post office held the view that it was not possible to prove that Catherine had been dishonest, and for that reason the post office did not bring criminal proceedings. However, the post office still pursued a civil claim against her and obtained a charging order over her property. The family's finances were devastated. There were days when there was not bread to eat. Catherine says, "There came a point where I had no money. We were scraping to get the weekly shopping, and I had to sell my grandfather's farm to get the bank off our backs. I had grown up with my grandparents. My grandfather would not sell the farm, and if anyone tried to buy the farm, he would chase them away and say it's for Cathy. It was a huge hit for me and hurt a lot. I felt so guilty about selling the farm, as I felt I had let my grandfather down." Catherine concludes in this way: It was a really unfair thing for the post office to do. They were so vindictive and told lies without batting an eyelid. They did not worry in the slightest. People should be held to account, because you cannot do what the post office had done in your professional life. You cannot accuse people without evidence. Post Office Limited sent people to prison with no evidence. It was horrendous. Sir Julie Carter was a sub-postmaster at a post office branch on the Biddick Hall estate in South Shields from March 2004 until June 2009. Prior to her appointment as a sub-postmaster, Mrs. Carter ran a care home for the elderly, and her husband, Kevin, operated 4 newsagents, one of which had a post office. When Kevin bought another shop and needed someone to help run it, Julie left the care home and started working as an assistant. After approximately 18 months, she became the sub-postmaster there. Ms. Carter received 2 days training provided by the post office. However, this was undertaken at a time when she was working as an assistant, and no further training was provided when she became sub-postmaster. Ms. Carter started to experience shortfalls, which escalated following the installation of a Bank of Ireland ATM. The helpline staff told her to place shortfalls in a suspense account, which she did. On one occasion, following the advice from operators of the helpline, a £5,000 shortfall doubled overnight. Julie estimates that throughout her tenure, she paid, or the post office deducted, in excess of £69,000 in respect of shortfalls or discrepancies. On the 21st of May 2009, Ms. Carter encountered a shortfall amounting to £69,655.24. Later, this figure was corrected to around £57,000, which Ms. Carter paid to the post office in instalments. After repeated contact with the helpline, Ms. Carter received a telephone call from a post office requesting that she attend a meeting in Gateshead. Ms. Carter was told that the meeting had been called to discuss how the monies in the suspense account could be repaid. This shocked Ms. Carter, as she had been constantly asking for help and assistance from post office. She was distraught to be faced with a figure of £36,000, which post office told her she had to make good. In order to facilitate that payment, Ms. Carter and her husband remortgaged their family home in the sum of £15,000, which was paid to post office. Additionally, she agreed to pay £500 per month to post office against the alleged shortfalls. Even after this time, shortfalls kept occurring until they accumulated to nearly £70,000. Following an audit, Ms. Carter's branch was found to have a shortfall of £69,655.24. She was suspended immediately. Her home was searched, which she says was a violation of her privacy. This devastated her. She was told in a meeting with investigators that she faced prosecution. In addition, at a disciplinary meeting in Durham, Andy Carpenter told her, "Do yourself a favour, pet. Resign, because you're going to get sacked." Mr. Carpenter told Miss Carter that she would be sacked for misrunning her branch. Miss Carter and her husband were placed under immense stress. By this process, Miss Carter's husband suffered a heart attack, which the couple attribute directly to the stress. In order to satisfy Post Office's demands for payment, Miss Carter and her husband sold their business at a significant undervalue, £125,000 compared to their valuation of £200,000. Mr. and Mrs. Carter lost their home and have had to move into social housing. Miss Carter suffers from severe multiple sclerosis. Her husband is now her full-time carer. Miss Carter and her husband have lived in the shadow of the scandal for years. Miss Carter's marriage suffered and she became a recluse. She felt as though she could not socialise with anyone because her name and reputation had been tarnished in her local community. Miss Carter's mental health suffered alongside her physical health. She and her husband began to dread Christmas, fearing that they could not buy their grandchildren presents and could not face their family. Miss Carter feels that the post office destroyed the livelihood of her and her family. She now enjoys a lower standard of living than she had before. Business failed and is living in social housing. She believes the post office needs to apologise. She wants those responsible to be held accountable for the financial and emotional hardship which has been caused to her and so many others like her. Sir John Dwyer was a sub-postmaster of the post office in Almada Street, Hamilton, from January 1996 to July 2016. Mr. Dwyer says that the previous post office paper-based system worked well. You could check everything and, as he says, know pretty much where monies would be. After the introduction of Horizon, John estimates that he paid or post office deducted in excess of £100,000 in relation to shortfalls which arose in the Horizon system. Mr. Dwyer was audited on 3 occasions and threatened with the closure of his branch unless he paid the sums which the post office alleged he owed. Mr. Dwyer was terrified that he would be prosecuted for theft if he did not make the payments that were demanded. Mr. Dwyer resigned from his position as sub-postmaster because battling the Horizon system and keeping the post office going had taken over and was ruining his life. Mr. Dwyer has been deeply affected by the post office Horizon scandal. He says, I am a completely different person since the events of the post office occurred. They knew their system was flawed, but they continued to deny it. They happily stood by whilst innocent, hard-working people were struggling, their lives destroyed. I have lost my family. I no longer live with my wife and 4 children due to the stress that this has all placed on my family life. I do not know how to quantify the effects this has had on me, but I have been through hell. The only way of describing how I feel is grieving. Losing my business was like losing a child. My feelings of deep loss, including loss of dignity, continue every day. I would like to see Post Office Limited brought to account. They need to know how much suffering their actions have caused. Sir Joanne Folger ran the Boulder Street Post Office in Liverpool between February 2002 and September 2009. She became a sub-postmaster after a career in the financial industry. Joanne had in-branch training on Horizon for 5 days, which she found to be inadequate. She asked the post office for additional training, but was told that she had received all the training they could offer. From her first day in the branch, Ms. Folger experienced system problems. The Horizon system was continually going down and needed rebooting regularly. Ms. Folger refers to the helpline as the helpless line, as staff did not have the knowledge or experience to assist her. Joanne says it was difficult to get through to the helpline and, on many occasions, the helpline could not answer her queries. On balance days, the days when Joanne needed the helpline most, the helpline never answered her calls. Ms. Folger experienced shortfalls and in 2006 was advised by the post office that there was a £32,000 shortfall. She had constantly asked for the post office for help to determine the cause of shortfalls. Ms. Folger's last audit took place in July 2009 and she was suspended and her contract subsequently terminated. Ms. Folger was forced to declare bankruptcy and lost her family home. Her marriage broke down due to the strain. Ms. Folger says, "By the end of the whole experience, I was a frail, anxious individual who had lost all faith in her abilities, with a failed marriage and medicated to numbness." Ms. Folger was left homeless, bankrupt, and the subject of gossip. Joanne blames the post office for all of this. Sir Mr. Graham Stanley was the sub-postmaster of Longford Post Office in Warrington from February 2001 to December 2009. He decided to become a sub-postmaster because he thought it was a good opportunity. Graham intended to run the post office until retirement. Graham undertook 5 days of training on Horizon in February 2001. The training provided was totally inadequate. He estimates that he and his staff contacted the helpline many times a month regarding problems relating to shortfalls and balancing. The helpline was not helpful. Graham estimates that throughout his position in branch he paid or the post office deducted in excess of £30,000. On the 31st of March 2009, 2 or 3 auditors attended the branch and advised Graham of a supposed £22,000 shortfall. Graham made a partial payment of £6,268.76 immediately by cheque, but was still suspended. He was summoned to a room above the main local post office and was interviewed under caution by the post office investigation team. Graham was made to feel like a criminal. The post office sent him a letter banning him from his premises, and he was not to set foot in the post office, and he has not set foot in the post office or shop since. Graham was led to believe that he had no alternative but to pay the shortfalls and repaid the post office in the region of £30,000. He lost value in the post office, which he had paid £220,000 for. Graham lost his earnings of £3,000 per month. Graham narrowly avoided bankruptcy with the help of family and selling all his property. Graham no longer owns his own home and has no assets at all. He suffers from depression, anxiety, stress, and a constant upset stomach. Graham had to borrow money from an ex-partner to pay the shortfalls. The post office's actions led to the breakup of his relationship. Graham says that after the post office investigators came to his home and looked through his and his partner's bank statements, his ex-partner was furious. Graham's ex-partner was a senior manager with a large banking group and thought that Graham had taken the money, as she didn't think that the post office would fabricate such allegations. Graham was forced to sell his house by the sea. He had no income and ended up living with his elderly mother, who had dementia and was quite poorly. Mr. Stanley would like the inquiry to get compensation and financial redress for the victims and for the post office to give a proper apology. Sir, I have about another 10 minutes, if that's all right with you.
Of course.
Sir Manhar Mystery was the sub-postmaster at Malabar Road in Leicester from January 2002 to January 2020. Manhar feels the Horizon training he received was inadequate. He says he was not trained on how to deal with any transaction corrections, which then contributed toward the shortfalls later. Manhar says the helpline advisors were not able to assist him in investigating transaction logs on the system and would simply refer him to the training manual. He says he was made to believe by the advisors that the errors reported were mistakes on his part or an error by one of his staff in counting the stock or cash. Manhar paid £2,500 in shortfalls to the post office, having been led to believe that he was at fault and that he had no alternative but to do so. As Manhar used his own money to make up the shortfall so that the post office system would balance. Manhar says he was distressed that he had to pay out money when the problem was not his fault. He found the post office to be unsympathetic and says he was worried each time when there was a shortfall. He did not want to burden his family with the issue, so he kept this to himself. Manhar says, "I would like to see some clarity and accountability from Post Office Limited and other parties involved in this scandal." Sir Miss Susan McKnight was the sub-post mistress of Appleby Bridge Post Office in Wigan from January 2005 to September 2009. Prior to this, she was a civil servant, but retired due to suffering from multiple sclerosis. Ms McKnight received 2 weeks of training on Horizon before taking on her role, and a 10-minute session when the ATM was installed. She found the training very basic and inadequate. Susan would call the helpline 2 to 3 times a month regarding shortfalls, which increased when the ATM was installed. The amount increased to almost £53,000, and the post office took a charge on her property. In August 2008, the post office was audited and a shortfall found. Ms McKnight was suspended for 12 weeks before being reinstated when she agreed to make monthly payments to pay the shortfall. A further audit was conducted in September 2009, and Ms McKnight was again suspended and eventually her contract terminated. Post Office Limited moved the post office out of her premises, which led to a decline in income. She could no longer make the mortgage payments on her home, and repossession proceedings began. Post Office Limited obtained a judgment against Susan in January 2013 and placed a charge on her home. Susan was interviewed under caution and threatened with criminal proceedings. Ms McKnight lost the business entirely in 2014 when the property was repossessed. Susan and her family were the subject of local gossip. Susan suffered with anxiety and was made to feel like a criminal. Her multiple sclerosis was exacerbated, and she also developed breast cancer. Her children suffered with depression. Ms McKnight says, "Because we were well-known people in a small village, the embarrassment of the post office's actions was very hard on us, and there was gossip spread about us. It was very embarrassing to have to explain why we had our contract suddenly terminated or why we had our home repossessed. We were forced to hide things from people who we knew, which strained our friendships." Sir Mr. Carl Thomas Anthony Reid was a sub-postmaster of the Lark Lane Post Office in Liverpool from April 2013 until his suspension in June 2017. Carl's sons, Carl Reid and Thomas Reid, attended a 5-day training course, as Carl was running the newsagent at the time, and it was his sons who were going to be running the post office. Carl says the training his sons received was totally inadequate. The training was focused on customer service rather than actually running and managing the post office. Carl says they needed to contact the helpline almost immediately after taking on the post office, as he noticed that, when balancing the system, shortfalls would appear that he could not account for. Carl describes the helpline advice as being completely inadequate. The advisors were rarely able to assist in resolving any issues. On Boxing Day 2014, Carl's sons advised him that they went into the branch and the system was showing his £7,000 surplus. And then, when they went in the following day, the balance was showing zero. Carl's post office was not open during the Christmas period. Carl says, "How could a sum appear and then just disappear when we were not doing any transactions?" Carl believed that the post office had external access to the system and were able to manipulate the figures remotely. Carl's post office was audited twice. Following the audits, Carl had a meeting with Paul Williams, the post office area manager, who stated that the post office always got their money. Carl says the possibility that it could be an error with the Horizon system was never even considered. It was clear-cut. The post office said I was responsible for the loss. I agreed to pay the sum back through deductions in my salary. I had no other option. I could not afford to pay such a large sum in one go. Another shortfall of £44,000 was discovered on the 7th of August 2015, following a further audit. Carl and his sons were immediately arrested and questioned under caution. Neither Carl nor his son were shown any evidence or data despite repeated requests to see some evidence. Carl and his sons were waiting in limbo for 2 years before finding out that no charges were going to be brought against them. When Carl became a member of the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, the post office decided not to continue to pursue him for the money. To avoid being declared bankrupt, Carl and his family had to sell their home. Carl suffers from Meniere's disease, which is exacerbated by stress. He felt constantly ill, wondering how he was ever going to get the problems caused by the post office put right. Carl says, "I was distraught, thinking how my family and friends were going to react to what had happened, how I was going to pay the ongoing bills, my mortgage, and so on. It was such a devastating feeling to be faced with." Carl says when word got out that he had been suspended, all of the family felt stigmatized. Carl's wife found this difficult, as she has always been very sociable. Carl says, "I don't know what we would have done without our family, who were very supportive and kept us strong. They knew that being accused ripped us apart." Carl says, "The post office demanded their so-called shortfall immediately. I would like the post office to compensate me in the same way, immediately." Sir Mr. Victor Price had been working with the Spar retail company since leaving school. He rose in the ranks to become a general manager and brought his own Spar store in 1995 in Redditch. The store included a post office. Victor also acquired 2 further stores in 1997 and 1998. Mr. Price received 2 days of training when the Horizon system was introduced. He felt that the training was inadequate given the amount of information they had to take in. Mr. Price did receive some in-branch training but found the trainers were very keen to leave early. Mr. Price experienced shortfalls very early on and would call the helpline to make them aware of the shortfalls. The advice of the helpline was that the system would right itself. Mr. Price experienced shortfalls in both his branches. He was constantly on edge and the stress was becoming unbearable. The helpline made him feel that he was at fault, as they said there were no problems with the system. Mr. Price was told that he was liable and estimates he paid in excess of £7,000 in shortfalls. In about 2008, Mr. Price sold one of his shops as he could no longer cope with running 2 businesses. The post office made demands for £3,000 that remained owing in respect of shortfalls. Mr. Price was led to believe criminal proceedings would follow. In fear, he paid the amount on a credit card, increasing the debt he was already in. Mr. Price eventually resigned and sold his business. He now works as a self-employed taxi driver. Mr. Price says, "I went from being confident, outgoing, successful businessman with hopes and ambitions to losing everything. I felt defeated and crushed. It has taken many years to start to slowly build up again, but I fear I will never reach the same position I would have been in, but for the outright lies and cover-ups done by the post office and their associates." And so finally, Ms. Shanaz Rashid was the sub-postmistress of Lindsay Avenue Post Office in Sheffield from 2010 until 2016. Ms. Rashid says she had 5 days of classroom training on the Horizon system, but there was no training on balancing. When a post office trainer, Linda Lightfoot, attended the branch to assist with balancing, there was a £100 shortfall, which the trainer was unable to explain even after 3 to 4 hours of trying. Ms. Rashid was audited in July 2015 and an alleged shortfall of £35,562.10 was identified. Ms. Rashid was asked to make good the losses immediately. Ms. Rashid made it clear to the post office auditors that she did not agree that she was liable and that she could not pay. Ms. Rashid says that she overheard the post office regional manager telling the auditor to take everything from them. The auditors took the keys and changed the alarm code to Ms. Rashid's building. Ms. Rashid's contract was terminated without notice and she appealed. Her solicitors requested evidence in respect of the shortfall, but the post office lawyers only presented 2 documents which were inadequate for this purpose. Ms. Rashid felt compelled to resign. 5 years later, Ms. Rashid is still unable to access her own premises, despite the fact that she still continues to pay the rent under her 20-year lease. Ms. Rashid feels humiliated by the post office's actions and is frightened to return to the area of her post office due to the rumours that have spread which suggest that she stole money from the post office. Ms. Rashid lost her marriage and her home and suffers from stress-related illnesses. Ms. Rashid says, "I was devastated by the post office's accusations and could not believe what was happening. I was also highly frustrated that the shortfalls were never properly explained. The actions of the post office have taken my family to a dark place." Thank you, Sir Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Enright. So I think that concludes this afternoon's session, and I think we're due to start again at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Fine. Just so that everyone is aware, my colleague, Miss Elias Norris, is unable to be here tomorrow morning, but transcripts of everything that's being said are being made so that she will have the opportunity to read them, and she will also be able to watch it on YouTube. I haven't yet availed myself of that luxury, but she will be able to do that if she wants, if she thinks it necessary. So I'll see you all in the morning.